Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. Familiar with the name. Familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public, and we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Monday. It is March the 25th. My youngest daughter is 7 months old today, and I think she's going to start walking in about 15 minutes, which is terrifying. All of you who are parents. You guys, when you have little kids and they start getting mobile, there's a couple of moments during their development that are absolutely terrifying. The first is when they're able to crawl and that mobility starts. And the second is when they can open doors, like I remember watching Jurassic Park and the kids are trapped in the kitchen. This is the original Jurassic Park, obviously. The kids are trapped in the kitchen and they're hiding. And there's this door that's keeping the velociraptors from getting in. And then all of a sudden you see them get those claws around the door and it's like, and they start opening the door up. It's the worst feeling in the world. Every single time one of my kids has learned how to open doors, my wife and I look at each other with the same horror that those kids did in that in that movie. It's like, uh-oh, things are about to get really bad. We are about to have full mobility. All right, we got a full show again for you today. I have no idea why I brought that up, but yeah, it's been 7 months since the baby showed up. Isn't that something? So we got a full show today. We're going to be talking about Russia and ISIS and guns. Oh my. Yeah, and I said it in that way because it does feel ridiculous. These are the lions and tigers and bears. You remember that at the end of The Wizard of Oz, it was all in her head? It's all in our friends, the leftists' head, the fear. But the danger to our civil liberties and to us is real. It is ongoing. And it's about as scary as velociraptors learning how to open doors. There's nothing scarier than that. At the end of the day, we're gonna cover or the end of the show, we're gonna cover a 5-star review that says that we do 20 minutes worth of commercials in a 40-minute podcast. I think they're listening to somebody else, but I'm going to start with a couple of quick ad reads because I want to get into it deep and I don't want to get distracted. I want to make sure that we thank our sponsors right up front because they are the people that help keep us on the air and keep this as a full-time thing that I can do. So let's start off with my friends over at Patriot Coolers. I am now sporting the 16-ounce again because it is keeping my coffee hot. I am dying today. And I woke up with I slept for 7 hours, but I didn't sleep at all, I don't think. And one of the reasons that I'm able to do the show is because of Patriot Coolers. Go to patriotcoolers.com. The promo code is Kyle. There you go. See, I'm already kind of fumbling through it. This 16-ounce in blue is a fantastic tool to keep your hot beverage hot, a cold beverage cold. If you don't have something like this, especially if you don't have a handsome one that says Patriot, on the bottom, I'd turn it upside down, but I'd pour coffee on myself, and I'm kind of that clumsy right now. There's 50 stars engraved into this, and it's all enameled over really, really nicely. The finish is fantastic. It's all better. It's all better than the alternatives. I saw a lady on the plane the other day, and she was carrying one of these Stanleys with these like weird twisty things. Don't get yourself a Stanley. They're all trying to sell you this thing because it's exciting that somebody started covering it on Fox News. No, Patriot Coolers is where it's at. If you guys want a great hot or cold tumbler and you don't have one, this is the one that you'll keep. I've been using mine since 2017. I keep acquiring more of them. So check out patriotcoolers.com. Promo code Kyle, 10% off, $50 or more free shipping. Let's do that. And then let's also talk about another group of patriots. Look, we're going to be talking about a bunch of scary stuff today. Terrorist attacks in Moscow. We're going to be talking about the possibility the government's coming for your guns. Again, they actually been telegraphing this for years. We saw it under the Obama administration as kind of like they introduced it and then they pulled back. We had gun shortages. We had ammo shortages, if anybody remembers 2012, 2013, 2014. So when those things happen, what you want to do is make sure that you've shored up the things you can shore up. That means owning guns, owning ammo, owning food, emergency food like you can get at 4patriots.com/Kyle. Again, prepare or repair. 4patriots.com/Kyle is the landing page. They're going to give you the reason why, but you already know the reason. The reason is that they can shut down various access to things that will make you dependent on the government. What you want to do is be independent. Be able to make decisions not in fear, not in haste, but from a place of safety and preparation. And that means that you have to have calories in reserve. You have to be able to make sure that your comms work. You have a solar generator, things like that. Anything that can do to take you away from government reliance, you want to do those things. And you can do it at the number 4patriots.com/Kyle. There's 20 minutes worth of ad for you right there. We'll talk about Catholic vote in just a minute, but there it is. Let's get started right away. And the number one story coming at us from Friday afternoon is that the Russians are dealing with terrorism. They're dealing with supposedly ISIS fighters. All of that seems very, very suspect to some of us. I had a number of people from the intelligence community and former intelligence community reach out and say, oh, isn't this nice? We've got now ISIS allegedly doing attacks in Moscow. They attacked a concert hall. 4 men are suspected of carrying out this bloody attack, killing at least 137 people. Have you ever noticed how many more people die in terrorist attacks on these transactional basis in Europe and in Russia? The numbers are staggering. You know, we had one of our worst ever at the Pulse nightclub, which was similar sort of event. People out there kind of enjoying their freedoms on a Friday or a Saturday night, going out and trying to have a good time at a club. And we had 47 people killed. And that was a record-setting number from terrorism. Obviously, 9/11 is a totally different separate animal. The Russians had 4 dudes come in with guns and killed almost 140 people. I know there are others that are injured. So these people, these gentlemen that you're seeing in the picture on the screen right now from the New York Times photograph are all counterterrorism troops. They're in military fatigues. They are wearing balaclavas covering their face and their eyes are the only things that are showing. And they're showing 2 of the guys that were taken in to be arraigned, to be read charges about what they were involved in. And supposedly these 4 were from Tajikistan, and they were migrant laborers. Interesting, migrant laborers to Russia. They've been remanded to custody. There's this sort of outcry. All 4 of their names are unpronounceable to me, so I'm not even going to try, but they've led them. 2 of them pled guilty. I guess 2 didn't enter a plea. Looked like the guys were pretty well beat up. There was this kind of movement on social media of people saying, yeah, you know, they're terrorists. Beat the hell out of them. Electrocute their genitals, because that was one of the things that's been alleged that was done. These guys look like they were in terrible shape. And that's not good. That's not a good instinct. We all have that instinct towards revenge and the hatred for people that are involved in terrorist activities. But it's very important that we remember the fundamental difference. The reason why our system is set up the way that it is one, a presumption of innocence. That's really, really, really hard. It's very hard to presume innocence even when people are caught in the act of doing something evil. Part of what we do in the Western civilization, part of what we do in the United States that's exceptional is that we take people who have obviously done the thing that they are alleged to have done, and we outsource vengeance to what's supposed to be a third party. This is why our federal judiciary being weaponized is incredibly dangerous. It's not supposed to be. There's a reason why Lady Justice is supposed to wear a blindfold. We are not supposed to look at them and go, yep, they obviously did it. We're not even going to weigh the evidence. We're just going to come in and we're going to shock their balls off, which is literally what we're talking about here. They supposedly hooked up massive voltage batteries and electrical prods and shocked their genitals and got the confessions. That's not due process. And the reason why we don't want that for people who are obviously bad and terrorists is because that can immediately be turned the minute you change the name terrorist to MAGA extremists. The minute that you can say the government is going to now define who's the bad guys, and then those bad guys are going to be treated with all this force. Awful. We got TACP in the chat saying you should do it after they're convicted. You know what? That's what the 8th Amendment tells us too. That cruel and unusual punishment. We're supposed to try to take this thing out of the realm of biblical vengeance, the eye for an eye, the Hammurabi's code, and try to take it to a level of justice. It's such a hard concept. That's why our government is important. That's why when our government is not working, it's important to know that it's betraying our values. And our values is that, look, we're all inflamed and angry and we're supposed to remove it. That's the reason why the Electoral College exists, because people are excited and they want to elect a king. And we take that one step away from people. It used to be, prior to the states all agreeing that we had a popular right to elect a president, that we didn't even get a say in the president. It was going to be the state legislatures. You elected somebody who then cast ballots, who went and elected somebody. It was far away from this kingly idea, the king being the person who could say, this is justice, cut off their head. This is not justice. You know, we don't have Old Testament kings in this country. But there is that strong instinct for human retribution, and we are constantly at war with it. There's no question about it. I want to tell you why I think that instinct in Russia, and I don't know whether or not this was inspired by an intelligence community operation, but it's definitely interesting to think that suddenly Russia is having problems, and the claim was that these people were exported in, and that there was Ukrainian involvement. We obviously have a lot at stake financially now that we've invested so much. That's why I'm wearing the Zelensky special. That there is money involved in this for the U.S. government, which is gross. All of that's gross. And yeah, this is the Zelensky special. This is in honor of a $1.2 trillion package full of garbage that the American taxpayers are now on the hook for because of our representatives in Congress who just fell over. The scary thing for me is that if we're going to allow the government to define who is and who is not a bad guy, and then they're going to subvert our processes that are supposed to be blind justice, which we know is going on, and it's always gone on to some degree. But they're pulling the blindfold off and they're slingshotting at us like a stripper taking off panties now and kind of slapping them in the face at a bachelor party. It's like grossly, disgustingly obvious in our face that that's happening. I don't know why that analogy was so obvious to me, but there it is. The way this works is they tell you what they're going to do. They wait for the pushback. They wait for the outrage. Then they don't do it. And then a little bit later on, when you've calmed down and you've quieted down, they slip it right in. Right? Here's a story that comes out of Catholic Vote's Loop. I recommend that as well. Folks, you guys can check out the Loop at catholicvote.org. If you are not getting the Loop, you're missing out on some excellent coverage, including this one right here. This is actually a story from Daily Wire. So they are actually a news aggregator service over at Catholic Vote. They are not writing all of their own stuff. Here's what we're seeing. DOJ. They're going to launch a quote-unquote national resource center to aid authorities in taking firearms from people who are deemed, quote, a threat to themselves or others. Do you see how dangerous this is? The minute that you let the government be the ones that are the arbiter, instead of having a neutral and a third party, a judiciary and a jury of your peers, unless we maintain our firm grip on due process, which we've definitely slipped on. This is where this goes. This is Zach Jewell reporting over at Daily Wire. Joe Biden's Department of Justice announcing Saturday. Interesting how they slipped it in on Saturday, a non-news day. That's why we have to cover it right now. That they have launched the National Extreme Risk Protection Order Resource Center. Well, that sounds like a lot of words to take people's guns, which is all that's about. But this isn't a new concept. Merrick Garland, who always sounds like he's about ready to cry because he's a feeble man doing evil things. Weak men are the danger. Total aside here, weak men being the danger. My wife and I had this conversation about bad boys the other day. My Quantico roommate, who I've referenced before here, he would tell us as a joke, because my friends were pretty hard dudes. One of them was like 275 pounds and 6'1", former SWAT team guy, broken a bunch of bones, had his leg chewed off by a Doberman at one point in time and surgically reattached like his calf muscle. Hard dude. Freakishly big looking dude. Another one of my buddies who I'm still really close with, prior Marine, right? And was famous for carrying a JanSport backpack full of frags that he would toss whenever he went on patrol in Iraq. Dropped out of college specifically just to join the Marine Corps and the infantry to go do work. Like, these kind of guys were my friends. And then this other guy who was like an intel analyst and he worked in the FBI and that was his only job, and pops in and now he's an FBI agent. He's a really, really nice guy. And we used to kind of do dude stuff around, hanging around, just kind of BSing about stuff. And he always wanted to be kind of part of the crew. And he's a really lovable person, like one of the nicest guys you ever met. And he would say, do you know what? I don't know if he was drunk or if he was tired, but he looked at me at one point. And he goes, do you know why my wife married me? I said, why is that, buddy? And he goes, because I'm a bad boy. We all kind of laughed because he obviously wasn't. And so my wife and I started talking about this concept over the weekend. Why were women interested in a bad boy? What was the lure there? And then interestingly enough, we watched Roadhouse last night, which is also kind of fun. Another reason why the 80s was better. Why the bad boy? Why was that a lure? And the lure is because a bad boy is willing to be a dickhead and aggressive towards other men. And if he's willing to do that towards other men for himself, he's probably willing to stand up to whatever is popular, whatever other people think is right. He's willing to do like maybe the wrong thing, but for the right reason kind of deal, for his spouse, for his mate, for the person that's under his protection. So that guy's willing to shirk what is considered socially acceptable to do the sort of the bad boy thing. He's willing to be the bad guy in the right situation. And it reminds me of the fact that I had one of my wife's friends at one point say, hey, did you know that this guy had all these guns when you started dating him, when you thought about marrying him? And she said, yeah, I did. That's why I was interested, because I knew he would protect me and my babies. So there you go. My wife knew this early on. She was like, the key is the guy a jerk to you, or is he just willing to be a jerk when necessary? There is an important need for men to stand firm, even against sort of the public tide. And one of these moments is when our government is saying things like, oh, we should take all your guns because they're scary. Okay. And that's what we've got Merrick Garland basically saying. That was my Merrick Garland voice. Oh, we need to stop people from extreme risk. We have to get their guns. You do that, there needs to be someone who's going to step up and say, absolutely not. Screw you. And we're going to talk about a guy who did that in New York, and he's facing down the threat of 8 years in jail, maybe more, in state prison. Really ugly. All right. So anyhow, this story didn't start over the weekend. That's not where this started. And the thing that they always love to talk about are extreme risk protective orders. I might even skip ahead here if you guys give me 1 second. I'm going to find something that bothered me. Let's see here. I went looking through the Constitution because I don't know, like, call me crazy, but I care about stuff like that. And I wanted to know, is there anything in the Constitution where we say there's a need to protect? Like there's an authorization for the federal government to protect. The only time the word protection pops up is right here. All right. Article 1, Section 1. And the protection that we're talking about in this case is equal protection under the law. That's it. That's all. That's the entirety of it. There's no more. Now, when they pass these crazy decisions, when they do these executive orders, when they introduce laws like they've done in New York, which is what we're going to talk about in a bit, and they say, we've done something that we know is flying in the face of the Constitution. In fact, there was actually a Bruin decision, which was from a court case that originated in the state of New York. And the Supreme Court ruled overwhelmingly in favor of one thing over another. They basically were ruling in favor of the individual's liberties, and it destroyed the idea of a shall issue versus a may issue state, which is to say that if you want to get yourself a pistol permit to carry a gun to protect yourself, the state no longer can say, well, we may issue it, but we're only going to do it under special circumstances. It's only for people who have a lot of money and connections. No, you shall issue it, which means you must issue it. That's the legal words. Now, you think when they passed these crazy laws right after Bruin, where they said, well, now we're just going to redefine all the sensitive areas to be places where you might be. Church, public square, shopping areas, anywhere that you might want to carry a gun, we're just going to make those off limits too, which is expressly flying in the face of this ruling by the Supreme Court. They've expanded the so-called gun-free zones. And you think, well, it's all going to get handled in the courts again. We'll just sue them. The problem is this concept of standing. And many people are not aware of this. So I spent Saturday night in a Twitter space with a guy who goes by the Twitter handle Carbon Mike, but his name is Dexter Taylor. He's the picture that is on our thumbnail for the day. And he brought this up, and it's a really critical distinction. The concept of standing is what is at stake here. We don't always have standing to challenge the rules until somebody runs afoul of that rule. This is the Alliance Defending Freedom for Faith, Family, and Justice. And this is their little quick pamphlet they had that said, what is legal standing? Standing is a legal term that is used in connection with lawsuits and a requirement of Article 3 of the United States Constitution. Now, I think it's too narrowly defined by the way that our courts do it, but it is a constitutional principle that in simple terms, the courts will use standing to ask, does this party, quote unquote, have a dog in the fight? What they are trying to determine is, are you someone who is actually aggrieved by the situation that you are alleging? And can you step in and bring a lawsuit? Standing participants, it limits the number of people that can bring lawsuits. It's good in some ways because we don't want frivolous lawsuits, and people who do not have standing should not be able to bring it. But I would argue to you that the narrow construction saying that if the law has not been actually enacted yet, or if they've proposed it and they've passed it, but they haven't executed the provisions of the law, we should not have to wait until somebody comes in and infringes our civil liberties in order to have standing. That's gross. That's not American, and that is not what the Constitution was designed to do. It was designed to protect the individual, not protect the government's crappy laws. But this is what it's been used of late. It has been used to protect crappy laws that are flying in the face of decisions that have already been out there. And then what they say is, well, nobody's been affected by this law, so we really don't know. And you don't have standing to bring a lawsuit preemptively. I put this on there because it's critically important to understand that many of these things need a willing victim. There has to be a sacrificial victim before you can actually bring said lawsuit. And this is what the government is banking on. Again, the government does not have a dog in the fight ever. That's the thing that we should realize. And we're going to see how you have people on the political left that are now simping on behalf of a government when the government is only designed to serve and should only govern with the consent of the governed. It should only serve the will of the people, not its own will. The government has no interests. The interests of the government need to be defined as the interest of the people. And we don't see that over and over again. I've got a ton of topics, so I want to get through all these things here. Let's throw this one up. Okay, here it is. Going back a little ways, we had a blasting by Thomas Massie and some others saying, what the hell is this evil? Great stuff. The red flag operation that's being admitted by the Biden administration. Crazy, nutty, insane, but it didn't start right there. Fox News covered this, so thanks for them doing that and getting it out bigger. What they said is that Kamala Harris went to Parkland, the school where there was a shooting, which is an emotional trigger for people on the political left. What you're seeing on the screen right now is a father whose child was killed at Parkland. I'm going to play that video in just a moment for you as well. Kamala Harris went to Florida because she can use an emotional touchstone to get people to say, look, we're not trying to do anything crazy. Cackle, cackle, cackle. We just want to do training and technical assistance so that we can have responsible implementation of gun laws that are designed to keep guns out of the people who pose a threat to themselves or others. Do you know how many times those words appear in the Constitution? Risk? Not at all. Extreme? Not at all. So all these ideas of extreme risk laws and red flags, they're all antithetical to our constitutional principles. It just says one thing about weapons in the entire Constitution, and it's in the Second Amendment that happens after they finish passing the entirety of the document. The Second Amendment said what? Congress cannot infringe upon it. The government has no interest in people's weapon holding. And I'm an extremist on this stuff, folks. I believe that people who've been convicted of felonies, once they've done their time, if they're allowed to come back into polite society, then they should be allowed to own weapons, period. And that may not be a take that everybody's comfortable with. But this goes back at least over a year ago. Here's a Political article talking about how they announced, you guys remember this? This was like very insane at the time, and they let it all die down before they came back. Biden announced the first ever federal Office of Gun Violence Prevention. This is the thing that he put Kamala Harris in charge of. This is why Kamala Harris was down there hanging out in Florida. And then they let it just sit quietly and cool down. This is an advance the agenda and then let it cool off. In the military world, when we start doing things like evasion, I mentioned that I went to SEER school. One of the things they do is they tell you to move forward until that you might have been spotted. And if you are spotted, you're supposed to actually stop before you're spotted. But if you happen to be spotted by enemy forces, your job is to stop doing what you're doing and then slowly shrink down into where you are and then create time and distance away from the place that they saw you last as best you can without being spotted. This is a time and distance situation. Introduce the concept, inflame everybody, and then do nothing with it. You haven't heard any of the gun violence prevention initiatives announced by this White House until right now. And now they think the time is opportune. This is the father who doesn't want his child to be used as a political pawn since his child was killed by some evil bastard with a firearm. Mind you, killed by a person, not by a gun. Just happened to be that the gun was the tool used. If that kid had been killed by a semi-truck that had been crashed into a classroom, it'd be equally awful. But you wouldn't hear like an outrage about trying to limit the access to semi-trucks. It's always about guns because guns also have a secondary purpose. And that purpose is resistance. That purpose is making the government know that you are a free citizen and not a subject. So here's this father saying he's disgusted about it. I think it's worth listening to this man and his words. When I heard it over the weekend, I knew I wanted to play it for you. If that's not playing audio, that's no fun. I changed all the audio setups, and now it sounds like none of our things are going to work. So give me one sec here. Let me see if I can just link this in real quick. I apologize, guys. One of the tools that I've been trying to deal with is that we had our software all crash on us, and it didn't need to crash, but it did. And so then when you try to play video clips, like I just did, they don't always work. Here we go. Let's try it right now.
Well, I'm
not working, then that's not helping us. Are you guys not hearing any of that stuff? I'm watching the chat over here and you guys are saying no audio. I know it's being played on my end, so this is always crazy. I love this. This is my favorite thing about dealing with our sound. We may have no video clips for the day, in which case, that's not very good. How about... I'm going to actually troubleshoot this in real time, so give us 2 seconds here because I actually want you guys... Go back.
I expressed some frustration today on social media about a visit to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, where my daughter Elena was killed in her English classroom over 6 years ago now. What's frustrating to me is that this building should have been demolished years ago, and it's now being used as a photo op for politicians that want to push an agenda. But politicians that, quite frankly, don't understand what it takes to protect our nation's schools, don't understand the causes of the Parkland tragedy, don't understand what led to the tragedy, and are just there, quite frankly, to push their gun control agenda. I'm tired of it. It needs to stop. The building needs to be demolished, and that I know many of the other families view that ground as sacred ground at this point, and the sooner these photo ops stop, the happier we'll be.
So there you go. He goes on to talk about how the vice president went out there, and obviously she did. She's got announced remarks and also a fact sheet that was released by the White House. So we're going to talk about some of what those things are. I want to throw them on the screen. These are direct quotes from Kamala Harris speaking at Parkland. Thanks for your patience, y'all. It's always frustrating when I can't get the audio to work on here, even though we had it all set up beforehand. My favorite. Mark Naughton just said he's tugging on my wires. Here we go. So these are the little pieces that were thrown out there by the White House, written speech for Kamala Harris, and they go as follows. Are you guys ready? Red flag laws. Oh, you can just hear her say it too, because she's so bad. Red flag laws are simply designed to allow communities a vehicle through which they can share and have somewhere to share it. Information. Oh, God, she's so bad about the concern for the potential danger or the crying out for help of an individual. Who structures this garbage? And then let's get to them before the tragedy occurs. She said the second reason she's here to talk about national resources for red flag laws. The National Resource Center will be put in place, so they'll give training to local leaders on how to use red flag laws in communities. By the way, red flag laws, every single one of them, they're incredibly dangerous. Number one. Number two, they subvert our actual constitutional right to due process. because you don't face your accusers. You don't get a chance to face those who are witnesses against you. And the government makes a decision to remove your life, liberty, or property from you without actually going through a real process. And talking to a judge is not a process. That's not what we are guaranteed. You want to remove something from somebody, you better do it by a jury trial. They're worth more than $20. And so, she says, these are just but some of the ways that we can learn from what happened here. She's talking, of course, what happened at the school. How about the fact that a cop didn't do his job, which is expected, and maybe we are all responsible for our own personal safety. That's the facts. Freedom's dangerous. She said, I will continue to advocate for what we must do. And then here comes the final little Trojan horse. They're always going to sneak it forward as best they can. Universal background checks, assault weapons ban, and what we must do as a community to treat and diagnose trauma in our communities. No, not trauma, mental illness, you clown. Kamala Harris, this disingenuous, horrific, terrible actress. Universal background checks, by the way, are the back door to doing what? They are the back door to complete gun registration. Do you know why? Because if you want to universally check backgrounds whenever a piece of private property is exchanged between another private party, two private parties get together, they exchange. If I go and sell my neighbor a hammer next door, or I give a gift of a hammer, how would the government know that a hammer was exchanged? The only way to do that is for me to report I am now giving a hammer to my neighbor. Are you comfortable with this? The government has no purview in that. They have no standing, it turns out, in this particular situation. And the idea that they would pass these types of laws, which should be considered antithetical on their face to the Constitution, is massively problematic. Assault weapons bans. Why an entire class of things that are ill-defined? In fact, we have that definition of assault weapons. Here's a video clip, which I'm going to fix in real time. Don't worry. We'll get this thing done. The idea that assault weapons should be destroyed or removed from our polite society is also problematic. Because they don't even know what it is that they want to get rid of, do they? Give me 1 sec. I'll pull the audio out of this thing as it comes on.
Because they're extraordinarily dangerous and are not appropriate for legitimate self-defense purposes, close quote. Tell me what you meant by assault weapons.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Just to clarify there, I was local counsel. Our Supreme...
Yeah, but you wrote the brief. Tell me what you meant by assault weapons.
Senator Kennedy, actually, I did not write the brief. The brief was written by...
You signed the brief, though, didn't you?
Correct. I signed the brief.
When you sign a brief, you're testifying to the court that everything in it is true, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So
they're your words.
But I didn't write it, and I don't know anything about guns, and I don't know what an assault weapon is. Let me tell you what they're talking about right here. This would be one right here. I just pulled this out of my safe today for this particular situation. This would be considered an assault weapon by them. Why? Has it assaulted anybody? No. This is a short AR pistol with a brace on the back of it, as protected right now by a court injunction with a suppressor on it, which makes me not an a-hole when I go out and shoot because it's really loud. Do you know what this does? Does it make it silent? No, it's super loud. It's incredibly loud. In fact, you need ear protection even with the suppressor on. It just makes it nicer for your neighbors. This would be considered an assault weapon because it's a semi-automatic rifle. I got another one. Check this one out. This one was my issued gun. This is what I used when I was on duty with the FBI. This is what's known as the Quantico Special, made by Geisley Automatics. This is another one that they would have a problem with. And this one they have less of a problem with because the barrel's longer. By the way, overall length of these two, exactly the same. One of them has a can on the end of it, what we call a suppressor or a silencer. The other one doesn't. These are really nice rifles, by the way. And they're really effective for doing all kinds of things. Shooting coyotes, if you're protecting your neighbor, protecting your home, which we've heard about. There's nothing about these things that they can define that makes them explicitly. And then you can go look at something with a wood stock, like a Ruger Mini 14, shoots the same caliber, was used in the Miami shootout of 1986 against the FBI. Same exact caliber weapon system. Do they know anything? They call these high caliber. Those are low caliber. That's a 223 5.56 round. It's a tiny little hole. It's the size of a 22. It's got more powder behind it, but it's not big. They've lost their ever-loving minds. They know nothing about the things they're talking about. Imagine, I shot high calibers. I was out there in Idaho. We were shooting a high caliber. That's a 50 cal. We shot a 50 cal that shoots a bullet like this. That's high caliber. They can't figure out what that's all about. because they're not talking about things that make any sense. They're not making actual points that are going to register with anyone. What they want to do is disarm you. What they want to do is take the conversation away from the facts and into the realm of emotion. They want to distract you, telling you that you're doing the right thing, that feels good. This is a feminine instinct. This is why I talked about bad boys earlier. The instinct of human beings is to go with the herd, is to go ahead and conform. That's what we do as human beings. We look around, is everybody doing what I'm doing? That's how you get that elevator behavior where one guy turns around and faces the rear. If three other people do, the person who's facing the front door will turn around and face the rear, even though they don't feel like they should. They know that they are being socially pressured just by the way their body works. They're going to have this significant social anxiety to comply. And they are trying to use compliance tools to try to get rid of your firearms. Because firearms are the ultimate expression of human and individual liberty. There are two things. One, having your own opinion and being able to voice it in a boisterous way without going to jail. Number two is that you can defend your ability to do that if someone tries to stop you. Let's get into this story about Dexter Taylor. Here's the press release coming from the DA's office in Brooklyn. Pretty gross. Statement says this: Bushwhacker man indicted for illegal possession of ghost guns. Ah, yes, the dangerous illegal ghost guns, except they're not illegal, except there's been a constitutional right to own these things, having finished and unfinished guns, to buy an 80% lower. I've seen the federal government make moves on these before they even said they were doing it publicly. They went after guys who were associated with, wait for it, ISIS. Why? Because ISIS is a good boogeyman to pin it on. And they stopped a guy who was involved in some sort of, belief that he was going to go after and do terrorism, which he never did, by the way. He never did a single terroristic act in the United States. But ISIS, guns are bad, MK. He tried to buy what's called an 80% lower, and the government called it a gun. They moved the needle, and a federal magistrate judge who has the ability and actually has the duty to read things and understand what they mean, chose not to, and just signed off on the government's warrants. This happened in Florida, in Tampa, on a case that we worked, and I saw the affidavit after the fact, as I just told you all. They love it. They love pushing this agenda and moving the needle. The search warrant that was executed for this gentleman, whose name is Dexter Taylor, happened on April 6th of 2022. They announced this on April 22nd when they actually did the indictment. The search warrant came first, then the indictment later, and they collected 4 assault weapons. Oh, you're hearing it here again. Assault weapons. Those are the dangerous things. 5 completed handguns. So I love that the word completed in there. 4 completed rifles. 8 lower receivers for rifles, which are considered firearms by the ATF, even though they actually violate the law. Their definition violates the law of what a receiver is. 5 lower receivers for handguns. Handguns don't have receivers, so this is already inaccurate. 4 magazines, God forbid. 7 pistol magazines. 4 upper receivers and casings and bullet primers and gunpowder to build ammunition and various tools commonly associated with the building of firearms, as is his right as an American. And so what did they do? They had an ATF's search warrant get involved. And then the ATF brought in task force officers who would otherwise had no reason to go into this man's house. And how did the ATF find out about it? We can pretty much guarantee it. And Dexter confirmed it to me over this Twitter space. I haven't seen paperwork, but I can pretty much guess because I've seen this done before. What they did is they went and raided one of these companies that sells polymer 80s. They threatened them under federal force, saying, you will be destroyed if you do not comply with us. Give us your customer list. And then they went after the customers, which is what they do. And I know they do that because they've done it to me. I've had the ATF show up at my door. If the federal agent shows up at your door, the answer is, unless they have a search warrant, they're going to break the door down and they're going to knock it down anyway. And if they tell you they have a search warrant, they better have one. But if they tell you otherwise, if they just say, hey, we're here to talk to you, we'd like to discuss something with you, the answer is GFY. Politely. With all due respect, GFY. Get out. You say nothing. There's no reason. Don't explain it. Don't try to straighten it out. Tell them to leave. Let them come back with a warrant if they have probable cause. The danger in this case is that the federal government saw probable cause based on something that they did because they raided and then they got cooperation from a company. They got this guy's information. They went in and they alleged that something happened that did not happen. And then when they got there, they were like, well, we don't have any federal charges, but luckily we have these state law enforcement officers, these task force officers here. This is why Steve and I keep talking about how you've got to divest from the federal government. Our task force officers can no longer be complicit in doing this stuff. Even some federal crimes like this. The idea is that there's an ideological bend to the agencies. The ATF should be basically spending all their time figuring out how fast they can get our tax stamps so that when I buy a suppressor, it doesn't take me as long as it does. In fact, there shouldn't be a tax stamp on it, but if there is, it should take minutes the same way it takes me minutes to buy the rifle. It shouldn't take me months or years to get something that makes it quieter and more comfortable to shoot on. But it does, and it's all part of it. So here's another little article we're going to throw on the thing. This is coming from Red State. They've been a good job covering it. Dana Lash has been covering it, which is great. She's always good on firearms. I appreciate her takes on this. The funny thing is, we're talking about women stepping into a space. What we need are men stepping up into this space and not taking any SHIT. We need to stop listening to this feminized version. There's a reason why Kamala's doing it. The left is the political party of the feminine in this country. I don't mean of women, I mean of the feminine. It is the emotional party. It is driven by compassion. It's not a terrible thing to have a political left, but it is a terrible thing to be run by a political left. We have to know that we are specifically saying that I'm not mad about females. What I'm mad about is the feminine having a disproportionate push in our national idea right now, in our national conversation. Emotion. We need to push back against it with reason and rights and things that were written into law. So this is the balance that is fundamentally off right now. The whole anger about toxic masculinity is specifically because masculinity balances out femininity, and when they are in balance, then everything works as it should. But when there is no balance, then you have emotional feminine men and feminine ideas pushing into the space that are basically moving our Overton window, that conversational space, farther and farther to the left about what is and what is not tolerable to talk about. The only way to resist that is free speech, which is why free speech is being criminalized, why things like using red flag laws, what they're saying is oh, you must be dangerous because you've said dangerous things that we don't like. And now we're going to take away your ability to actually implement anything. They weaponize the one so they can go after the other. The FBI is very complicit in this. They are more than happy to create threats against religion. They'll say that there's a threat from religious people, that there's a threat from free thinkers, from people who don't like what the government is about. We need balance. The balance are critical. And we're not balanced right now. We're decidedly balanced to the left. The scales are off. Dana Lash talking about this. I'm going to play the Dana Lash video that I've got here. I want you to hear what she kind of frames this discussion as. I highly recommend. This is about 12 minutes long. You guys can find it on YouTube. So do that when you are ready. Go find yourself and listen to the story of Dexter Taylor in his own words with Dana Lash. But we'll get her to kind of frame it out here real quick because I just wanted to play a little bit of it.
He's also, and I say this because I think it's a compliment. He's a nerd. Right? He loves math. He loves machining things. He loves software engineering. Look at all the stuff he's got behind him. That's a nerd man cave right there. But Carbon Mike, AKA Dexter, first off, thank you so much for bringing this to my attention so we can get this story out here. I know Jeff Charles at Red State and some really other great folks have been doing this too. I want to make everybody familiar with this. Everybody knows, Ghost Guns is such a goofy name. So many people I know make their own firearms, and you don't have to serialize them. That's federal law. It's USC 1822 or 18 USC 922 A through Z. You don't have to serialize them unless you're selling them, which you're not doing.
Correct. Not only, basically, not only did not intend to transfer or sell them or anything else, the state of New York should know this. Because of course they seized my daily driver, my computer, my regular desktop, my work laptop. They seized my phone. They seized my credit cards. They subpoenaed my email records. So they know that I wasn't out there talking about guns. I wasn't out there advertising guns. I wasn't out there talking about them on social media. And I certainly wasn't talking or thinking about transferring weapons. These were my weapons, my rifles. I named them. You know what I'm saying? And I was trying to start my second career in weapons science, right? I had all these plans to buy some land in New Hampshire and, build a gun lab and,
that's awesome.
Kind of bring my expertise as a software guy and as a data guy to firearms. I was looking up to guys like Bill Geisley from Geisley Automatics, who got his first contract, right? Building triggers for the U.S. Army sharpshooting group. You know what I'm saying?
He goes on and talks about the fact that being a gun nerd is a thing. It's a concept in the gun world. And he just referenced this Geisley Automatics. This is the company that started putting these out. This is the most accurate semi-automatic rifle that I own. Bill Geisley. His background is mechanical engineering. You're looking at Dexter Taylor. His background is software engineering. He wanted to apply system-based sciences. I listened to him discuss how he wanted to use basically closed system energy to be able to look at it, to be able to look at a weapon system in the same way you would look at an electrical system, an electrical engineering principles, conservation of power, and how you could basically look at each one of the types of implements, from the expansion of the gas to the projectile to the functioning of the trigger systems to the functioning of the spring systems and the buffers and so on, how all of those are capacitors and resistors and pieces of circuits. So you could kind of analyze. This is a nerdy way to look at things. This is a scientific way. This is a very masculine thing to do, to look at information and try to break it down to its constituent parts. There's no emotion involved in that. There's no, oh my God, children involved in that. So he wanted to go and do that. And he has every right to. He took his background in software engineering, his understanding of technology, and then he went and played against it, looking at how do we take this new world that we've developed where we have micro printing and we have micro milling capabilities to do one-off N=1 experiments and try to figure out by tinkering with certain systems, which is what you do when you're trying to make these things work. Having built polymer 80s, it takes a lot of work to get them to actually function in a way that you would actually rely on them. You're changing springs out. You're changing the amount of friction. You're changing the types of lubrication that you're using. You're changing the barrel systems, which have different tolerances. You have to worry about tolerance stacking, which is to say that each thing that is made by a different company is going to have a certain amount of precision. And if you have imprecision that stacks on imprecision over and over again, they will not work. I've taken guns and been like, man, I've literally sat there and had people videotape from the same angle behind me as I fired a weapon with the exact same ammunition from the same box to see the angle that we are ejecting brass at, to see if it's consistent, because that tells me that there's a consistency within the weapon system. And if not, then I need to tune either a trigger, I have to either tune a barrel or the type of ammunition, or I have to tune the type of spring. This stuff is not easy. This is science and art at the same time. And that's what Dexter was doing. And they went after him. Why? Because he had no criminal record, because he's a black guy that nobody's talking about. And we had a long discussion about race. This would be an incredible opportunity for Republicans to seize on the fact that they took a 51-year-old man who is on the tail end of his life, right? He's the second half of his life, who had a successful career in technology, which they tell us is the future. And he wants to apply it towards firearm systems. And what does he do? He gets arrested by an overactive DA in a fascist type area, which is to say that the federal government and the state governments are co-opting and they are pushing on businesses. They are pushing forward agendas, and those businesses are complicit because it's favorable to them. They used technology and information to go after a man who had no record, and they're looking to turn him into a felon. They're looking to say, don't do this. This is an example of what you should not do. Don't go out there outside of the lines. Go buy your guns from registered FFLs. Make sure that you are not getting unserialized things that you're allowed to build, that you've been allowed to build for all of the United States history and before. Don't go and exercise your liberties the way that you want. Only do it the way that we say you can do it. Play within our lines. And by the way, we're going to keep shading those lines deeper and deeper and deeper in. And you'll have less and less of an ability to move until the point where you're just stuck like this, where every single firearm, you better ask permission. You want to go to the range, you better call the range control officer and clear yourself so that you can drive to the range, be able to use it, and then it's only going to be in a prescripted area. They already have this, by the way. It's called England. England did this. They lost all of their rights over a period of time. They ceded them because they never had a constitutional requirement that the federal government stay out of their damn business and stop infringing. That's the difference between having a monarchy and having a constitutional republic based on principles of individual liberty, where the person, the individual, is the ultimate arbiter. That's the sovereign. That's the whole concept of a sovereign citizen, that you are the sovereign of yourself, that you are the person that's responsible for your own freedom, your own time, your own actions. And some of those actions, if they are bad and they infringe on other people's civil liberties, other people's freedoms, then you have to face consequences by a third-party arbiter. That's what we're supposed to do. It's really not that hard. Freedom is dangerous. People abuse it all the time. They did at Parkland. Somebody abused his freedoms to go and infringe on other people's freedom to exist without that guy shooting them. And that's evil. And that's why we have a justice system. That it's supposed to take the need for revenge, the want to put, electrical current through that guy's testicles and make him feel every single second of the rest of his miserable life, we take that away because that's not what we do in this society. That's an emotional reaction. That is an aggressive emotional reaction. And we give way to reason and say that person has to be locked away for the rest of his or her life and can no longer engage with the public. We've ceded the ability to take revenge. And that's supposed to protect us from the emotional outbursts of our neighbors. And instead, what we have is a government that is engaging in emotional outbursts and emotional language and an attempt to emotionally inflame our passions to give it more and more power. This is the unfalsifiable premise that exists when you say, if we just had more money, if we just had more funding, if we just had more power, we could help you better. What you need to do is just trust us. The American Constitution is written from a place of fundamental distrust from the institutions of men. That's why it's written the way it's done. That is the compromise between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. The Federalists said, you need to be strong enough that it can actually do the things we say it's going to do. And the Anti-Federalists said, yeah, but guess what? Every time you build an institution, it's going to reach over its boundaries. So we got to give it some real hard guidelines. How about 10 amendments saying exactly what it cannot do so that we know? And by the way, we're also going to add 2 more amendments, the 9th and the 10th. The most easily overlooked amendments, they are the most important in many ways. They were the caveat to swoop it up. What they said was, just because we said that these are the rights that are existing doesn't mean that those are all the rights. And the second thing they said is, and if we didn't say something that was given explicitly to the federal government within the Constitution, you can't touch that. It's not for you. It's not for you. One of the things that was written into the Constitution, which is so crazy, which is why these New York laws are so gross, is the concept of the ex post facto law. It's explicitly written in Article 1, Section 9. Go out there and read it, folks. This is what it says. Congress shall not pass any law, ex post facto law. They cannot be passed. Ex post facto simply means that is a law that is dealing with something after the fact. Ex post facto, after the fact. You can't do it. It's expressly forbidden. It's verboten. And you're also seeing on the screen that the states cannot do this. Nobody can say that we are going to take a law, pass it today, and then hold you accountable for something that you did in the past. And that's what's going on with Dexter. That's what's going on with Mr. Taylor in the state of New York. His trial starts today. It may have already begun. We're going to try to get him on the show. He needs a loud microphone to speak. Anybody who's listening to this that wants to bring him on ought to do so. But there's a reason why our founders knew that writing laws after the fact, that's an emotional reaction. That is a feminine reaction. This was bad. We're going to fix it. And by the way, anyone who violated it in the past. No. How could they violate a law that didn't exist? Ex post facto laws are forbidden by our Constitution. Again, Article 1, Section 9. Go read it. And then Article 10, Section 1. Sorry, Article 1. This is both Article 1. I just got ahead of myself. Section 9, Section 10. Section 9 tells you that the Congress, the federal law. Section 10 says the state. These are both from Article 1, which are the powers of Congress, the legislature. But it's expressly forbidden. We can't do it. And it makes you wonder. It makes you wonder why they're going after this stuff. Makes me wonder because it goes to this. This is the only time the word safety appears. I know we've held this till the end, but safety appears in the Constitution only one time. The privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. What's going on at our southern border right now? Are we being invaded? Have we seen people push back against federal officials and run and overrun them like we saw the other day? This is a picture from the same journalist that took, her name is Jenny Tare, I believe. And she took the video. She was part of the video team that showed us that overrun down in El Paso that we saw last week. You know what this says right here? If it's too small for you to read on the screen, let me read it to you. It says, members of the media, please stay off the ramp and stay away from the sliding gates. Do not disrupt U.S. Border Patrol operations by being in the way of transportation vehicles. I'm okay with all that so far. Number 2, do not attempt to make contact with migrants unless authorized by U.S. Border Patrol officials. Excuse me? Please refer all inquiries to the U.S. Border Patrol Public Affairs Office. I don't think so. We don't take our orders from the government when it comes to what we can or cannot do from the media. We have a freedom of the press. We have a freedom to speak. We have a freedom to ask questions of people, even if they're in the custody of Border Patrol, and those people can speak or not speak on their own. How dangerous. that they're putting it in writing. How dangerous that we're talking about habeas corpus, and the only times that that can easily be suspended are in times of rebellion or invasion. And then I want you to consider the following. The last little bit here. The words extreme risk or extremist do not appear in the Constitution. This is Merrick Garland's actual words. The launch of the National Extreme Risk Protection. Again, the only protection we have is that of due process. The only protection there is supposed to be that everybody is supposed to have equal protection under the law. And now we're going to have a special subset of protections going after people with red flag laws federally is what they're trying to claim. They're going to give valuable resources to keep firearms out of the hands of individuals who pose a threat to themselves or others that is not the federal government's purview. And then once again, you've got Missouri v. Biden, now known as Murphy v. Missouri. And there's a brief, this brief that I just snapped up comes from the Brennan Center, which is a leftist institution. And the Brennan Center for Justice, they should use that euphemistically because it's not what they're about, says the case addresses the role that government officials can play in communicating with social media companies. And they filed an amicus brief on behalf of this bipartisan group of election officials that explains why ensuring government officials remain free to communicate accurate information about elections on social media companies is critical to American democracy. We don't have an American democracy, and there is no freedom. There's no freedom of government officials in their official role. The government is not given any specific freedoms. The people retain these things. That's why they're trying to change the language on you. It's why they are pushing the things that they are pushing the way that they are pushing. And if they are able to suspend habeas corpus in the case of an invasion, what if you facilitated the invasion? It reminds me of that movie V for Vendetta, where they talk about what if the only reason that they were able to seize power was simply because they engineered the need to seize power. This is a very old technique. The Reichstag fire, what we saw happen on January 6th. There are a lot of unanswered questions about J6. There are not very many unanswered questions about what happened in Germany. The Reichstag fire was an inciting event that they were able to use to move forward the ball. Wouldn't it be interesting to note that allowing an invasion on the southern border for a year allows them to claim, in fact, oh, we have an invasion, and therefore we must suspend habeas corpus. And what is that? That says you must produce the body. You must actually show that there is probable cause to believe that there is evidence of a crime, that there's something going on here. As opposed to saying, you've said some things we don't like, and we've got to silence you. Lincoln did this, by the way, during the Civil War, and they went and silenced dissenters because that was considered too dangerous. They had to stop it. It was a time of rebellion or invasion. And you've got our president framing us at the beginning of the State of the Union that we're all MAGA extremists, even those of us who are not MAGA extremists, which I am not. But I'm okay with being smeared that way because I will join you all when it comes to going down on civil liberties. I will 100% fall down on the side of civil liberties. Extremely. First Amendment, absolutist. Second Amendment, absolutist. I believe in the Bill of Rights 100%. I don't think there are any exceptions. Why? Because I read the words, and the words don't have any exceptions in them. We need to all stop accepting that. We need to fight for ground back. And the story that we have of Dexter Taylor in New York is a great example of it. It's the state saying we're going to do it, and there was no way to preemptively stop those laws, and then they came after him anyway. They knew what they're doing. This is a coordinated effort to try to remove your civil liberties. So Russia, ISIS, guns, oh my. If everybody's a terrorist, we better stop all the terrorists. And if we just redefine how terrorists are, then it's going to be you. Real scary stuff. And not good for America. You know what is good for America? My friends over at Catholic Vote. You guys, like I said, there's a lot more news of the day. This is just the one that I fixated on for the while. Go to CatholicVote.org, get the loop. You can go to CatholicVote.org/loop if you want to get that. I'm adding to my 20 minutes of commercials here, which were set. And we're going to do a 5-star review real quick. Again, you can follow Catholic Vote on social media too. Their takes are getting better and better over on Twitter, where I spend a lot of my time. At Catholic Vote is the handle, at Catholic Vote. How about this 5-star review? First of all, this is from Kawanji11. I don't know what Kawanja 11 says, commercials, 40-minute podcast. 20 of those are commercials, shaking my head. It still gave us 5 stars, so we'll take it. And then 7 Asmo said, Kyle Seraphin, Truth Bombardier. It's catching, by the way. It's in my bio now. Truth Bombardier, dropping truth bombs, and just gave us 5 stars in addition to 5 stars. Look, we'll take 2 5-star reviews even if one of them says that there's too many commercials. I don't know where that came from. We'll fix the audio situation here again. Appreciate your patience as we worked through that. And all of you all, I hope you have a lovely day. I hope you are nice to your neighbors, but you understand that we have to have firm masculine resistance to the feminine in the world. Otherwise, we are going to be unbalanced, and that will be absolutely disordered for this country. And it is a fatal flaw tipping that way. It's fatal. It's dangerous. We can do better. We should do better. We used to do better, and we will do better in the future. God bless you guys. We'll see you soon. See you in the morning tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.